Part 2, Moses, a reluctant messenger. Exodus 2, 1-2. And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. Previously, Pharaoh had ordered the 2 midwives, Shipra, whose Hebrew name means beautiful, and Puah, whose Hebrew name means splendid, light, or radiant, to throw the male babies into the river, as the sheer numbers of Hebrews frightened him. The midwives refused to do this as they feared God. Moses' mother was afraid for her baby and hid him right away for 3 months. When Moses' mother can no longer hide her baby, she places him in an ark in the river. Pharaoh's daughter has come to wash in the river, sees the ark, and sends her maid to fetch it. Moses' sister Miriam is standing far off to see what is going to happen to the baby. Pharaoh's daughter knows right away it's one of the Hebrew children. She knows that her father commanded all the male Hebrew babies to be thrown in the river. The sister goes to Pharaoh's daughter and offers her mother's services as a nurse to the baby. Pharaoh's daughter accepts the offer and pays the mother for the nursing of her own child. I posit that the mother returns the child Moses to Pharaoh's daughter when he is weaned. I checked on the weaning of babies on Medela.com. Quote, although nowadays it takes about 6 months before a baby gets some solid food, mother's milk is still recommended until at least the age of 2 with other complementary foods. Historically, though, it could be 2 to 4 years. Others say that our ancestors might have been breastfed until the age of 6 or 7, unquote. In the book Everyday Life in Ancient Egypt by Lionel Casson, in the chapter titled The Family, he writes, soon after a child was born, it received a name, had its horoscope cast, and probably had the birth recorded in a local registry. Until infants were 3, they were carried around by their mother in a sling, hung about her neck, and were the objects of her devoted care, unquote. Another mother who kept her baby, the infant Samuel, until he was weaned was Hannah, in 1 Samuel 1:22. But Hannah went not up, for she said unto her husband, I will not go up until the child be weaned, and then I will bring him, that he may appear before the Lord, and there abide forever. Let us say Moses was returned to Pharaoh's daughter at the age of 3, as was the customary weaning period in Egypt. His mother would want to keep her baby for as long as possible. Then Moses becomes Pharaoh's daughter's son by adoption. Exodus 2:10, and the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, because I drew him out of the water. And Stephen, in his dispute that ended with his death as a martyr by stoning with the elders of the synagogue of the freedmen, Cyrenians, Alexandrians, and those from Cilicia and Asia. In Acts chapter 7, verses 20-22 from the New American Bible. It was at this time that Moses was born. He proved to be an exceedingly handsome child. For the first 3 months he was reared in his father's house, but afterward he was abandoned, and Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought him up as her own son. Moses was educated in all the law of Egypt. He was a man powerful in word and deed. We meet Moses again when he kills an Egyptian who has been hitting a Hebrew man, one of Moses' kindred. He hides the Egyptian in the sand. The next day, Moses tries to break up a fight between 2 Hebrews. One of them challenges him and states that he knows Moses killed the Egyptian. This is when Moses runs off to the land of Midian. Pharaoh, who finds out what happened, seeks to kill Moses for the murder of the Egyptian. In Midian, Moses rescues Reuel's 7 daughters and their flocks at a well from which other shepherds try to drive them away. Reuel, whose Hebrew name means friend of God or prince of God, is also known as Jethro, which means his excellence or posterity in Hebrew. When Moses is introduced by the daughters to their father Jethro, they say in verse 10 of chapter 2, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock. Here are more questions. What makes Moses, a born Hebrew, an Egyptian in their sight? Why does Stephen say Moses was eloquent when Moses said to God in Exodus 4:10, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant. I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue. It is for the same reason that you, dear listener, know that I am not born in this country. His accent. Moses' speech gives him away. I've heard people say that Moses had a speech impediment. He was reared Egyptian, learned the Egyptian language in his formative years, and spoke Hebrew with an accent. And I can tell you from personal experience that you do not lose your accent, yet it may become less strong over time. At this point in his life, when he arrives in Midian, he had the Hebrew vocabulary of a 3-year-old. His birth mother, a Hebrew, would have taught Moses some Hebrew words and sentences. Moses was eloquent when speaking to Egyptians. As stated above, he was educated and learned their law. He was one of them as far as the Midianites and the 2 Hebrews whose fight he tried to break up were concerned. Apart from his accent, while Moses lived in Egypt, he quite likely would have looked Egyptian by having his hair shaved off and wearing clothing fit for an Egyptian prince. By the time he arrived in Midian, he might have started growing his hair and beard as well as changed his clothes to not draw attention to himself. Moses now becomes a shepherd after he is taken in by Jethro, the priest of Midian, who gives him his daughter Zipporah as a wife. Moses and Zipporah eventually have 2 boys. Gershom, the firstborn, whose Hebrew name means sojourner or stranger there, as Moses is a stranger in the land of Midian, and Eliezer, whose Hebrew name means my father's God was my helper, rescuing me from Pharaoh's sword, or help of my God. Moses lives in the desert for 40 years. During this time, of course, he adapts to Hebrew culture and is learning to speak fluent Hebrew, albeit with an accent, by being around Jethro and his family. Moses has gone from prince to humble shepherd. Sheep love eating leftovers or munching on grass, but they also eat sparse vegetation. Sheep provide milk and meat and clothing with their fleece. They usually stay together in a flock. You can learn how to lead them, moreover, how to lead them with only your voice commands or with a stare, such as sheepdogs tend to do. You can learn how to take care of their needs as well as how to enjoy solitude when tending to them. Sheep can get accustomed to any climate and they know how to balance even on steep mountainsides. Moses is leading his sheep to the mountain of God. This is when God seeks him out. God commands Moses, after speaking to him from the burning bush, the bush that burned, but was not consumed by the fire, to take off his shoes as it is holy ground. When Moses obeys, God tells Moses to go down to Egypt to tell Pharaoh to let Israel, whom he calls his firstborn son, go. God will lead them to the promised land, the land of milk and honey. He tells him that he is the God of his fathers in chapter 3, verse 6. Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. God has heard the cries of his children. He tells Moses of the plagues he's planning and that he will harden Pharaoh's heart. Moses is to perform signs and wonders with a rod that can turn into a serpent as well as turn a river into blood. Moses balks at the idea and asks God in Exodus 3:11, Who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt?